This happened to me on the night of August 11th, 2023, the night of the August full moon. I remember that date because I've never looked at a full moon the same way since. I had been driving back from a small family gathering about 2 towns over. It was late, maybe around 11:30 p.m., and the sky was unnaturally bright from the full moon. I live in a rural part of Pennsylvania, so most of my drive was through winding country roads surrounded by forest. There were no streetlights out there, just the glow of my headlights and the silver light of the moon spilling through the trees. About halfway home, I came to a sharp curve that I'd driven dozens of times before. That's when I saw him. A man was standing just off the shoulder, half in the shadows, half bathed in moonlight. He wasn't hitchhiking or waving, just standing perfectly still, facing the road. His head followed my car as I passed, and for the split second my headlights hit his face, I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. It wasn't anger or fear, it was curiosity, like he was studying me. I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe a farmer checking his property or some local out for a walk. But in the middle of nowhere, at almost midnight, and the way he was just standing there didn't sit right with me, I kept driving. About 5 minutes later, I realized I'd forgotten to check my gas gauge before leaving town. I glanced down and saw I was almost on empty. I swore under my breath. The only gas station between here and home closed at midnight, so I'd have to make it quick. I turned down a smaller road to cut across toward the station. That's when my headlights caught something up ahead. It was him. The same man standing on the side of this completely different road in the exact same posture, still, silent, head turning slowly to watch me as I passed. My hands tightened on the wheel. There was no way he could gotten there on foot in that amount of time. The shortcut I'd taken cut across fields and wooded patches. Even if he'd known the route, he would had to sprint through the dark to beat me there. I felt my skin prickle. This wasn't coincidence. I told myself again to just get to the gas station. When I finally pulled in, the place was dead quiet. Only one other car sat parked near the side of the building, an older model sedan with no front plates. I didn't think much of it until I went inside to pay, and when I came back out, the sedan was gone. I filled my tank as quickly as I could, trying to shake off the creeping unease. That's when I saw it. Across the road, under a streetlight, the same man was standing there. This time I could see more detail, tall, maybe in his late 40s, wearing a faded flannel shirt and dark pants. His face was pale in the moonlight, and his eyes didn't leave mine the entire time I stood there. I jumped into my car and drove off without looking back. The road home was quiet for the first few miles. I was just starting to relax when I noticed headlights in my mirror. They were far behind at first, but over the next few minutes they got closer. Too close. The car stayed right on my tail, following every curve, matching my speed. I didn't want to pull over, but I also didn't want to lead them directly to my driveway. I took a detour, pretending I lived somewhere else, weaving through back roads I knew well. The car followed every turn. Eventually, I spotted a small pull-off near a closed park entrance. I sped past it, then cut my lights after a curve and turned in quickly, hoping the car would keep going. I waited in silence, heart pounding. The only light was the glow of the moon filtering through the trees. After about 30 seconds, I saw the other car roll past slowly. In that dim glow, I recognized it, the same older sedan from the gas station. I waited another 5 minutes before taking the long way home. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was nearly 1 a.m. I sat there for a while, scanning the dark tree line before finally going inside. Every window was locked, every curtain drawn. The next morning, I checked the security cam I had pointing toward my driveway. Around 2:14 a.m., it caught the shape of a man walking slowly down the road in front of my house. He stopped at the end of my driveway, just standing there, staring up toward my front door for almost a full minute. Then he walked off into the woods. The police never found him. They said there been a few other reports that night of a man fitting his description loitering along roads and outside houses, all on the night of the August full moon. I still drive those roads sometimes, but every year when August comes around, I make sure I'm home long before the moon rises. This happened to me in August of 2021 on the night of the full moon. I was 19 at the time, living with my mom in a small rental house on the outskirts of a mid-sized town in Kentucky. Our backyard opened up to a tree line that ran for miles, and beyond that was nothing but fields and abandoned barns. It was quiet, sometimes too quiet, and on nights when the moon was bright, you could see almost as clearly as in daylight. That night, my mom was working a late shift at the hospital, which meant I had the place to myself. I planned to spend the evening on the couch watching movies and scrolling through my phone. I made popcorn, turned on a couple of lamps, and settled in. Around 10:15 p.m., I paused the movie to grab a drink from the kitchen, and that's when I heard it, the faint sound of someone walking through the grass in our backyard. It wasn't a raccoon or a stray cat. These were heavy, slow footsteps. I froze, listening. The steps stopped, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Then I heard the soft creak of one of the wooden boards on our back porch. My first thought was that it could be a neighbor, maybe someone who cut across our yard by mistake. But when I turned off the kitchen light and peeked out the window, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the porch near the steps. He was facing the sliding glass door, perfectly still, his features hard to make out in the moonlight. He wasn't moving toward the door or away from it, just standing there. I stepped back into the shadows of the kitchen, heart pounding, and grabbed my phone. I debated calling my mom, but I knew she couldn't do anything from work, so I dialed 911 instead. The dispatcher asked for a description, but I could barely make one out: male, average height, dark clothes. As I whispered into the phone, I heard a faint tapping on the glass. It wasn't the sound of someone knocking for attention. It was slow, almost absent-minded, like he was dragging his fingernails across the surface. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and that an officer was already on the way. I backed away from the window, keeping my eyes on the porch. That's when the figure suddenly stepped forward into the moonlight and I saw his face. I didn't recognize him. He looked to be in his late 30s, unshaven, with a strange half-smile like he was enjoying himself. He put his hand flat against the glass, fingers spread wide, and leaned forward just enough that his breath fogged the door. The way he was staring at me made my skin crawl, like I was the only thing in the world he wanted to focus on. I told the dispatcher he was at the door, and she reassured me the officer was only minutes away. Then, without warning, the man stepped back, walked to the left side of the porch, and disappeared into the shadows of the yard. I couldn't see him anymore, but I could hear him moving around, circling. I locked every door and ran to the front of the house, where I crouched low and peeked through the blinds. That's when I saw him again, walking slowly along the side of the house, looking up at the windows as he passed. It was like he was mapping out every entrance. The police arrived maybe 3 minutes later. Their cruiser lights swept over the yard, but by the time they got out and searched, the man was gone. The officer said they'd patrol the area and suggested I keep the doors locked and call again if I saw anything. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on the couch with the lights on, every creak of the house making me jump. Sometime around 2 a.m., I heard movement again, this time from the front porch. I didn't go to the window, but I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the couch and held my phone ready to call 911. The sound lasted less than a minute, then silence. The next morning, when the sun came up, I went outside to check. On the back porch, right where he had stood, there was a small piece of paper held down by a rock. On it, in messy handwriting, were the words, "You looked different in the moonlight." I called the police again and gave it to them, but they never found the guy. For months afterward, I couldn't look out into the backyard at night without feeling like someone was standing there, just out of sight. To this day, I wonder if he knew I was alone that night or if it was pure chance. Either way, the August full moon hasn't felt peaceful to me since. I've always loved camping, but that love took a hit in August of 2020. My girlfriend Taylor and I had planned a weekend camping trip to a small, lesser-known state park in Pennsylvania. It wasn't one of those popular spots with tons of people and amenities. It was quiet, remote, and, as we found out later, poorly monitored. We picked the weekend of the full moon because Taylor thought it would be romantic. She was into photography and she wanted to capture some long exposure night shots with the moonlight reflecting on the lake near our campsite. The forecast was perfect: clear skies, warm nights. We left Friday afternoon, packed light, and reached the park by 6 p.m. When we pulled up, the ranger station was closed. There was a sign-in sheet in a wooden box by the gate, but no ranger on duty. Only 2 other cars were in the lot, which meant maybe a couple other campers were somewhere out there. We filled in our names, grabbed our backpacks, and started the short hike to the campsite we'd picked online. The walk was peaceful, sunlight breaking through the trees, the smell of pine needles. But by the time we reached our site, the shadows had already stretched long and the full moon was starting to rise. The lake shimmered through the tree line, and I could already see why Taylor was excited about the night shots. We set up the tent, made a small fire, and cooked some food. Around 10 p.m., Taylor took her camera and tripod closer to the lake. I stayed behind, poking at the fire, sipping from a can of beer. The night was still, except for the occasional rustle of leaves and distant sounds of water lapping against the shore. About 20 minutes later, Taylor came back. She was frowning. "Someone's down there," she said quietly, "at the water, just standing." I asked if she'd seen their face, but she shook her head. They were just still, like completely still, not fishing, not moving. I thought maybe they were taking pictures too, but they didn't have anything in their hands. We both glanced toward the lake. From our campsite, we couldn't see the shore directly. It was blocked by trees, but I could feel it, that uneasy prickle at the back of my neck. I told her maybe it was one of the other campers. She didn't look convinced, but we brushed it off. She sat back down by the fire, though she didn't go back to take any more photos. Around midnight, we decided to get some sleep. The tent was small, just enough for the 2 of us, and we left the rainfly open so we could see the glow of the moon through the mesh. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not running, not stumbling, just a slow, deliberate crunch of leaves. They were coming from the direction of the lake. I froze, straining to hear. The sound stopped for a few seconds, then started again, closer. I reached for my flashlight but didn't turn it on. Taylor was wide-eyed, whispering, "Is that?" The step stopped again, maybe 10 feet from the tent. Silence. Then I heard breathing, slow, deep breathing just outside. I flicked on the flashlight, aiming it toward the sound, but there was no one there, just empty woods. My heart was hammering in my chest. I got out of the tent, scanning the trees. Nothing moved. Taylor begged me to get back inside, so I did. We sat there, whispering, debating whether we should pack up and leave right then. But it was past midnight, and the hike back would mean walking through pitch-black woods with one flashlight. We decided to wait it out. At some point, I must dozed off because the next thing I remember is waking up to a faint tapping sound. It was coming from the side of the tent, like someone running a finger along the fabric. Taylor was awake too, gripping my arm. We didn't say a word. The tapping stopped, and then there was another sound, something being dragged along the ground. It circled the tent slowly, once, twice, 3 times. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the flashlight and unzipped the tent in one motion. The beam cut through the darkness, and for a split second, I saw him. A man, tall, thin, wearing dark clothes just at the edge of the light. His face was pale, his eyes wide open, unblinking, and then he stepped backward into the shadows, vanishing. I yelled out, "Hey," and started toward him, but the beam caught nothing but trees. No footsteps running away, no sign of where he'd gone. We didn't wait until morning. We stuffed our sleeping bags into our packs, collapsed the tent half-heartedly, and booked it back to the car. The trail felt endless, every crunch of leaves making me spin around with the flashlight. When we reached the parking lot, the other 2 cars were gone. We were completely alone. The next day, I called the park office to report what happened. The ranger on the phone sounded concerned but unsurprised. He said, "Yeah, you're not the first ones to see him. We've had a few reports over the years. We've never caught him, though." That was the last time I went camping during a full moon, or anywhere without other people nearby.